There is undoubtedly a difference between the intellectual apprehension of an existential or spiritual principle and the lived embodiment of that principle. The identification of the apparently exterior world as being not entirely other can for some arise as a grounded, experiential realization. But for many, the nature of this realization can be more along the lines of intellectual appreciation from a distance. So how does one engage in life in a manner that honours and integrates the notion that mind extends well beyond the body, blurring the line between self and other? And why bother? To explore this, let's examine how the concept of the extended mind, introduced in Part 1, might encourage us to shift our sense of what the substance of the world is, how this relates to Buddhist principles and techniques, and how we can start to put this all into practice. Reflect upon the space that surrounds you, the space that is always present and within which your experience of life occurs. What if this space is not only an extension of you? What if this space itself is alive? All phenomena within this space are in flux. Nothing stands still. And by virtue of the passage of time, no physical space that you may ever consider consistent is really the same space twice. Coming to engage with your extended mind as such can lead you to a lived sense that everything is new and constantly renewed by your attention. But alas, on the flip side, nothing stands still, and so there is nothing to hold on to. This idea of a field of constant flux stands in stark contrast to the notion that the world is a dead, mechanical place in which living entities exist. Many of us operate with a sense that we ourselves are alive, that other organisms are alive, but the space in which we inhabit is mechanical or dead. If we really begin to take the notion seriously that all that surrounds us is mind, or at least intermingled with mind, then we must once again start to engage with the world as if the entire shebang is alive. Looking back to the cosmology of our ancestors, many cultures for many thousands of years lived their lives with the sense that the world itself is an organism, and as if phenomena and the patterns of events they experienced were expressions of something living. Whether or not this something living is personified or characterized, the key insight we can start to tap into is that the world we experience, from its component parts to the stories that unfold through time, are embedded in something that is better considered living rather than dead. Many key teachings within Buddhism assist a practitioner to identify that it is natural to seek what stands still, to seek something definite, something to hold on to. This may be a place, an idea, a philosophy, an image of the world, or an image of the self. But the nature of experience is that all is in constant flux within your living field of awareness, including you. So suffering follows from seeking that which stands still in a world where nothing does. Life is suffering. The equivalent two key precepts in Buddhism being desire creates and perpetuates suffering, and life is suffering. To relate this back to our symbolism of the extended mind, as explored in part 1, consider that this natural cycle of perpetual suffering and ignorance spoken of by the Buddhists comes from the organism's compulsive seeking of something to hold on to within our greater field of experience, our extended minds. Whether it be a solid sense of self or a solid worldview that allows us to apprehend the apparent chaos of life. Part of the problem here is that for many of us, there exists a number of fundamental assumptions that confuse our entire natural process of seeking self and seeking order in the world. To name but two, the initial identification of self with something distinct and consistent, our physical organism, and our idea of ourselves. And two, that order is achieved through the imposition of distinct categories upon the world. How might these assumptions confuse us? Well, if the starting point of any search is falsely apprehended, then it follows that the path we take to get from our starting point to our goal is likely not going to get us anywhere near that goal. As Robert Fripp, the guitarist of King Crimson, once said in a 1979 interview, "It is impossible to achieve the aim without suffering. If one is moving from Los Angeles to San Francisco, but one believes that one is in Phoenix, one's route is likely to be confusing, to say the least. In fact, there is a remarkably good chance that one will never get to San Francisco." So first of all, one has to be aware of the situation in which one is. To have a direct glimpse of that situation is quite terrifying. Part of what Fripp alludes to here, mirroring Buddhist thought, is that suffering is inherent to life because no matter how authentic and righteous our goals, we tend not to be aware of the situation in which we are embedded. We stride forth upon unexamined fundamental axioms that essentially ensure that we do not reach our goal and that we suffer the pain of ignorance. This dynamic might help you to appreciate why Zen masters in Japanese and Chinese Zen Buddhist stories appear to lead students on goose chases in response to students seeking an answer to their problems. Indeed, eventually, some students come into the realization that their mode of seeking answers, wherever it may be directed, walks hand in hand with the very source of their problems and the ignorance for which they seek resolution or liberation. Insanity has oft been described as trying the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Now we might think that when we try a new sport, adopt a new religion, get a new haircut, take up a new craft, seek out new friends, and so on, that we are trying new things to better our lives and to solve our problems. Because all of these paths seem quite different, we feel that we are indeed trying different things. We don't consider that we are acting crazy, engaging in the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. result. Instead, it's likely we believe we are engaged in some pretty damn solid self-development. And herein really lies the key. What is self-development if we subconsciously identify the nature of self in error? Part 1 of this series explored how we tend to identify ourselves with our physical organism and assume that our mind is in our head, even though this model does not hold up to thoughtful inquiry or resonate with science, psychology, or ancient wisdom. If we subconsciously believe self is singular and distinct, separate from the world, in the same manner that we see our physical organisms as distinct in 3D space, then no matter where we seek it, no matter how we look to develop it, we will persist in ignorance and folly, without resolution, forever. What Buddhism and our exploration of the concept of extended mind might help to unveil is that perhaps we are getting stuck, compulsively seeking answers to a problem we haven't really ever given our full attention. We keep trialing solutions and adopting answers to a problem we haven't been culturally directed to examine and haven't developed the tools to engage with. So what can we start to do to get ourselves unstuck? The Jason Bourne technique. Start practicing what Jason Bourne does when he enters a new room or a new space. And no, I don't mean lunge into combat before jumping out of the nearest window. I mean scan and take in the scene in which you find yourself in a subtle manner. Allow your eyes to pass over the space and pay attention to its elements. If you've seen the Jason Bourne movies, you would have picked up that within seconds of entering a new space, Bourne has taken stock of entrances, exits, number and types of people, hazards, vehicles, and committed all of these elements to memory. How? Practice. Practice and paranoia, but mainly practice. Ultimately, this skill is an extension of a natural survival instinct rooted in thousands of years of experience. An instinct atrophied in our time due to an apparent lack of necessity. In a wild environment, lumbering inattentively from one area to another will, 9 times out of 10, result in you running into trouble fairly quickly. It has been evolutionarily advantageous to maintain awareness of your surrounding environment. In a modern civilized environment, there is often little punishment for public inattentiveness. Unless you live in a relatively hostile and hazardous civilized environment, it's likely there isn't the pressing environmental necessity to keep your wits about you during the day. In fact, many people find themselves zoning out as a kind of survival response to the endless meaningless stimuli around them in the busy city environment. There is a great cost to engaging in this kind of inattentiveness through time, but it can be simple to curb the inertia of this habit. Consider that you have a responsibility to yourself to cultivate and retain a certain degree of spatial awareness as you navigate a day. Just like you feel you've got a responsibility to keep yourself clean, find and consume food and water, and engage with others in a generally respectful manner, you can also consider moment-to-moment spatial awareness an important responsibility for well-being. To put this into practice, perform the Jason Bourne assessment as you enter scenes in your life that are so common that you've found yourself tuning them out. This could be entering your bedroom, getting on your daily bus to work, standing in line at your favourite sushi joint. Start with these scenes that you interact with so commonly that you no longer really pay attention to them anymore. When you enter or engage with them, breathe. Take in your surroundings, casting your eyes over everything as if you were witnessing the space for the first time. Practice doing this calmly as you enter. Of course, you do not need to stand in the entrance of every room in your house, stunned and amazed, but do endeavour to feel that each space is alive and worthy of your attention. Recall from earlier in this entry, one subconscious assumption that causes confusion as we move through life is the conviction that order is achieved through the imposition of distinct categories upon the world. This assumption tends to underpin a sense that with certainty comes order and stability. To relax the grip of this subconscious assumption, start to practice catching yourself in moments when you become extremely certain. If your certainty revolves around a clear claim that you can write out in plain English, such as, "I must be feeling sad because of X, Y, Z," take a moment to relax and then work to think of at least two alternative statements or explanations that could serve as equally suitable. The closer these are to conceivably possible, the better. They can oppose or undermine your original statement, or they can provide alternative or complementary explanations. The purpose of this task is not to convince yourself that your initial conclusions are wrong. Its purpose is to increase your ability to even notice yourself entering a state of certainty, and to naturally draw attention to the intellectual constriction taking place when you are possessed by certainty. If you practice this diligently and regularly, catch, relax, balance, you will naturally come to identify that you can feel a deeper sense of balance when you are able to accommodate at least two potentially contradictory statements about anything, compared to how you feel when you are hooked on just one. Certainty eventually becomes less comforting, There's a reason Frodo cast the One Ring back into the fire from whence it came. Please humour my nerdy side here for a moment, and let us reflect upon some symbology in The Lord of the Rings. A ring of power, in the context of our practice here, might symbolise a complete and comprehensive model of reality. And with a ring of power comes, well, power. But alas, we are deceived. Though complete and final explanations are deeply attractive and appear to afford welders power, all are linked and underpinned by the one master ring, the principle of a complete and final explanation. This One Ring is the creation of the deceiver and is born of cruelty, malice, and the will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all. As emphasized by J.R.R. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, humans are particularly susceptible to the seductive power of the One Ring, or the principle of a complete and final explanation. Though we like to imagine that we are far removed from the primal and tribal urges of our deep past, they still persist in each of us and express themselves in subtle ways. Our often subconscious urge to conquer the chaos of the world through the imposition of finite categories and final explanations is one example of our raw animal nature dressing up in sophisticated clothing and strutting around undetected in our time. So if you find it helpful, like I do, imbue this exercise of catching yourself in moments of certainty and intellectual constriction with the gravity of the Lord of the Rings narrative. And do not allow yourself to descend into intellectual barbarism in service of the Dark Lord Sauron. The fate of our world depends on it. Rather than regarding the world as mechanical, external, hard, dead, and based purely in mechanical causality, if it is instead engaged with as being alive and mysteriously of the mind, then we can't really be so sure as to what the substance of our world is. Is it stuff? Things built up from smaller component parts? Or is it mind? Whatever that is. Active consideration of your extended mind might lead you to an enhanced sense of mystical participation in life, as the world's nature is mysterious and inextricably linked to the central mystery of self. Even the same places that we visit every day are reborn as mysterious if we consider them in the realm of our extended mind. Part of what we can lose as we become adults is the lived sensation of participating in a mysterious world full of enticing and terrifying unknowns. Rather than putting this dynamic down to children being naive, consider instead that it's reflective of the naivety of adults. Across a great many mystical disciplines, the key goals of a mystic are commonly described as union, self and other, union, God and man, union, above and below, union, higher and lower. Here, we may consider these as deep underlying goals, sitting fundamentally below all other goals we have in life. Below in the sense that they are fundamental, primal, and permeate more layers of our experience. In the symbolism of extended mind, these deeper goals, these deeper paths, deeper methods, may be considered to revolve around experience of union or continuity between little mind and big mind, or of our distinct selves with the world around us. From the perspective of such states, little mind and big mind never really existed, and the distinct self, as separate from the world around us, has no reality.